Welcome to Slacker Advice. This is our debut video, and let's not get dragged out with meaningless dribble drabble. On to the content. Today we are talking about something inexplicably boring. That subject is Terms of Service Agreements, or ToSs for short. There are other names and acronyms, but that's not too important to go over right now. What is important is a misconception I've seen quite a lot recently. That misconception is, of course, that they are not legally binding. A lot of people make the claim that a TOS is not law, and therefore is not a legally binding document and just a fake way for companies to control people. While in truth a TOS is not law, neither is a payment plan with your internet provider. But that in no way means if you stop paying, that your internet will just keep being there. It's quite the opposite. Fail payment, and bam, you're without YouTube's Netflix, or even some other obscure website where you collect people's faces between the crisp white pages of a mundane and plotless novel. The payment plan, or in this case, the Terms of Service Agreement, is a contract agreed upon by both parties over usage of a service or product. If you breach that contract as a customer or user, then you lose all privilege to the service content, product, and so on. However, if the entity providing the, and I'll just say thing for the sake of covering all things, does not have a TOS, then there can be a lot of legal issues coming on the horizon. And in that explains why when people see TOSs for big companies, and sometimes even little ones, they are designed to protect the provider more than the consumer. It's one thing to have a spat with an individual. It's another to be wrapped up in a massive legal battle where an entire consumer market base takes a singular side against a company. That's one example of how companies disappear into the ether. Now, the reason I personally got interested into researching this topic is pretty simple. I play a game called League of Legends, which a short while ago was in the spotlight for issues regarding its TOS. The issue I'm referencing is when both Riot Games, the company who created and manages League of Legends and the esports league for their game, banned a company known as G2A from the competitive scene, meaning they could not sponsor any professional teams, and if I understood correctly, this may have stemmed to other sources receiving similar restrictions too. This could possibly include YouTube channels, but I'm not sure of that. I couldn't find sources stating information on that definitively. The company in question, G2A, was banned because one of its business practices, which is the selling of leveled accounts for use in the game League of Legends, is something specifically outlined against in the League of Legends Terms of Service and against the esports league rules. However, a lot of people responded to this event, and some in rather surprising ways. Some were happy that this company was treated as such. Others thought it was silly and trite. Some didn't care. But the opinion that stood out most to me was people thinking terms of service agreements are not enforceable or not real. Quite frankly, yes, they are. And there was even a case where a man was going to be sentenced to years in prison because he broke a terms of service agreement. Sadly, that man killed himself rather than go to prison. And in the wake of that tragedy, new legislation was being drafted, or perhaps has already passed, depending on the time you watch this, or if I made a mistake and incorrectly read the date in my research. This legislation will hopefully reverse the status of violating a Terms of Service agreement from its current classification of being a crime into being classified as a breach of contract instead of a criminal act. Yes, that's right, a criminal act. You could potentially go to prison for breaking a TOS. On the other hand, depending on how a TOS is written, some companies may not have any traction to bring action against you. But that is usually only if they had a sloppy lawyer. So for the most part, let's just blanket everything with the simple command of follow the terms of service. On the other hand, though, if the terms of service are not shown to the user or consumer up front and agreed upon before action is taken, then the company won't have any grounds to take action on, as in Schnabel vs. Trilegiant Corporation, where the party did not provide the terms of service up front and have them agreed upon firsthand. However, more or less all companies have fixed this loophole by not allowing individuals to use their products and services until that innocent yet evil little checkbox next to "I agree" has been clicked. Now, there are sites out there like www.tosdr.org, which will give you brief summaries of different companies' TOSs, which honestly seems super helpful, and I will leave a link in the description below so you can check that out yourself. It even lists companies like YouTube or Apple, all the way to companies like Steam or Dropbox. You know, Dropbox, that file sending thing in your email that no one over 30 seems to know how to use. Back on track. Regarding League's banning of G2A, they specifically outlined in their terms of service that selling of accounts or even gifting or trading accounts is completely against their rules. Now, you might respond to this by saying it's your account and you may even have put money into it, so how can they tell you what you can and can't do with it, right? Well, that's where Riot Games became Terms of Service geniuses. In their Terms of Service, it states that they actually own your account, not you. So by selling it, you actually are violating their TOS and committing a crime by selling someone else's property. Talk about tricky stuff. League's TOS really is rather simple and straightforward, though. At least they have it specifically outlined. In comparison, if you look at game streaming service Twitch, you will see just how vague and blanketing a TOS can really be. Really, read this thing. It's super short and probably the most blanketing TOS out there, in my opinion. Things like how streamers dress are covered, and even topics such as self-destructive behavior, which can be interpreted based on personal opinion and moral definitions. So in short, while a TOS may not be the legal law, it is binding in the sense that it sets legal precedent and gives the company the high ground in bringing legal action against the consumer who breaks it, meaning they are going to, depending on the circumstances, shut you out of their services, seek some amount of payment from you, or even send you to prison for violating their service agreement. And remember, not getting caught breaking a TOS, or even not completely reading it, does not make it right to break the contract an entity agrees to. Know what you are getting yourself into before saying you agree. Who knows? They might have just got you to accept them as your supreme overlords for all eternity. And we both know you're too lazy to be a slave.